Will Smith was not born into greatness. He was born into fire. On September 25, 1968, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a boy entered a world that looked safe from the outside but hid storms that would shape the very core of his being. His father, Willard Smith Sr., carried the smell of machinery and the weight of discipline into their home each night, while his mother, Caroline Bright, brought the quiet strength of education and faith. On paper, it was a stable, middle-class family. In truth, it was a battlefield of silence, fear, and broken trust. At only 9 years old, Will's childhood shattered. He stood frozen as his father struck his mother, a moment so violent it seared itself into his soul. That night branded him with guilt that would haunt him for decades. "I always thought of myself as a coward," he would later confess. Not because he was weak, but because he did nothing, because terror locked him in silence. That scar became the hidden fuel behind everything he built, every smile he wore, every performance he gave. From then on, laughter became his armor. Humor was not joy, it was survival. If he could make his family laugh, maybe the walls would stop trembling. That mask of charisma, which later charmed billions, was forged not in happiness but in trauma. The Fresh Prince's dazzling grin began as the frightened child's shield. Will's home was not poor, but it was never safe. And so, television became his sanctuary, hip-hop his escape, performance his weapon. The boy who once froze in terror would one day command the world's greatest stages. His childhood was not an origin of innocence, it was a crucible of fire. And from that fire, a legend was born. In the mid-1980s, Philadelphia witnessed the spark of a dream that refused to be silenced. Will Smith, still a teenager with boundless charisma, joined forces with Jeffrey Townes, DJ Jazzy Jeff. Together, they created something the world had never seen, hip-hop that wasn't drenched in anger or rage, but in joy, wit, and infectious energy. They called themselves DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Their music was not rebellion, it was celebration. Their rhymes didn't spit bullets, they spread laughter. For the first time, rap didn't just echo on inner-city blocks. It filled suburban living rooms. It united families, broke barriers, and introduced hip-hop to audiences who had once feared it. Will Smith, at just 20 years old, wasn't just making music, he was reshaping culture. Then came the history-making moment. In 1989, he and Jeff won the first-ever Grammy for Best Rap Performance. Gold etched his name into history. It should have been a triumph beyond measure. But instead, it came laced with betrayal. That night, legends of rap boycotted the ceremony, furious that their category was hidden off-screen, treated as less than real art. So while Will smiled for the cameras, the room was hollow. The respect he longed for never came. Triumph tasted like rejection. The applause echoed, but it was drowned by silence in his soul. And then came the cruel reminder, money without wisdom is a trap. Fame showered him with wealth, cars, jewels, endless parties. But by 21, it was gone. The IRS came knocking. Millions in debt, his fortune stripped, his dreams collapsed. The boy who had held a Grammy now stood penniless, humiliated. That brutal fall carved his first great lesson: talent can open doors, but without discipline, those doors slam shut. Rap had given him a crown, but recklessness tore it away. At the edge of collapse, when his fortune was gone and his future dimmed, destiny came disguised as a man named Quincy Jones. In 1990, at a party glittering with Hollywood stars, Quincy looked straight into Will Smith's eyes and demanded something impossible: an audition, right there, right now, in the living room. And then came the cruel reminder, money without wisdom is a trap. Fame showered him with wealth, cars, jewels, endless parties. But by 21, it was gone. The IRS came knocking. Millions in debt, his fortune stripped, his dreams collapsed. The boy who had held a Grammy now stood penniless, humiliated. That brutal fall carved his first great lesson: talent can open doors, but without discipline, those doors slam shut. Rap had given him a crown, but recklessness tore it away. At the edge of collapse, when his fortune was gone and his future dimmed, destiny came disguised as a man named Quincy Jones. In 1990, at a party glittering with Hollywood stars, Quincy looked straight into Will Smith's eyes and demanded something impossible, an audition, right there, right now, in the living room. Will hesitated. He was unprepared, raw, still choking on the ashes of failure. But Quincy pressed with the urgency of fate itself. Do it now, or the chance is gone forever. And so, stripped of script, stripped of rehearsal, Will reached deep into instinct, into charisma born of survival, and performed. The room froze. Time stood still. His voice, his energy, his presence lit the air like lightning. In minutes, Quincy knew, this wasn't just an audition. It was history being born. That night, the boy once crushed by debt was reborn as the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. A sitcom that wasn't just television, it was resurrection. The series exploded onto screens, blending comedy and culture, laughter and heartache, giving America more than entertainment, it gave them Will Smith. He became not just a character, but a movement. For Will, it was more than a paycheck. It was redemption. A chance to rebuild from the rubble. He had lost his fortune, his respect, his footing. Now he stood on a new stage, crowned not by rap alone, but by television. The Fresh Prince was not just a role, it was salvation. From a Grammy with no respect, to debt with no hope, to a living room audition that changed the course of his life, Will Smith learned a truth that would guide him forever. Even in your lowest fall, destiny may still crown you, if you dare to rise. The 1990s belonged to Will Smith. From the neon laughter of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air to the roaring thunder of Hollywood blockbusters, he rose from sitcom star to global icon. Bad Boys ignited his career, Independence Day made him humanity's savior, and Men in Black etched his name into the DNA of pop culture itself. To millions, he was unstoppable, the fearless hero who could save the world with a grin, the king who ruled the box office with charm and swagger. But crowns come with chains. Hollywood crowned him its brightest star, but behind the dazzle of red carpets, Will was building a cage around himself. The world demanded perfection. Always radiant. Always untouchable. Always the savior. Critics sneered at his polish, mocking him as too clean, too artificial, as though joy itself was a crime. Every smile on the carpet grew heavier. Every laugh on set became a mask. The world adored the image, but the man behind it felt invisible. So he sought depth, even if it broke him. In 2001, he transformed into Muhammad Ali. This was no performance, it was war. He battered his body with endless training, bled through sparring sessions, and carried the crushing weight of embodying a man larger than life. Every punch in the ring was painful. Every line rehearsed was judgment. He earned an Academy Award nomination, but the cost was scars, both physical and spiritual. And still, he pressed forward. In the pursuit of happiness, 2006, he reached deeper than ever. Playing a father on the brink of collapse, Will poured his own childhood wounds into every tear, every trembling word. He was not just acting, he was exorcising ghosts. His pain became art. His scars became healing. Will Smith had the crown of Hollywood. But every jewel was heavy. Every triumph was shadowed. The world saw a king, but the king lived in a cage. It takes a lifetime to climb a mountain, but only seconds to fall. On March 27, 2022, after 3 decades of relentless work, Will Smith stood at the very summit of his career. That night, under the blinding lights of the Academy Awards, he finally claimed the golden statue every actor dreams of. Best Actor. For his role in King Richard, he wasn't just applauded, he was vindicated. The boy from West Philadelphia who once drowned in fear and shame now stood crowned by Hollywood itself. The ovation roared like a storm. Decades of sacrifice crystallized into glory. But the higher the crown, the sharper its edge. In the very same hall, under the same lights, the miracle of triumph twisted into tragedy. A joke pierced the air, about Jada, his wife, his wound, his devotion. Will rose from his seat, his face carved with fury, and walked toward the stage. And then, before millions watching live across the globe, he struck Chris Rock across the face. The sound of the slap cracked through the theater louder than the applause had moments before. Gasps swallowed the air. Time froze, and in those seconds, history veered off course. The night that should have sealed his legacy instead shattered it. The consequences were merciless. The Academy banned him for 10 years. Studios distanced themselves. Films collapsed in silence. The respect he had spent a lifetime earning crumbled in an instant. A crown won in sweat and sacrifice was stained by a single act of rage. For the world, it was a shock. For Will, it was exile. He confessed later, it was a scar for life. And it was not just a scar on his career, it was a scar on his soul. The applause faded. The lights dimmed. What remained was silence, and the echo of a single night that forever split his legacy into before and after. Behind every crown, behind every storm of fame, there is the battlefield of the heart. For Will Smith, the deepest victories and the deepest scars came not on stage, but at home. In 1992, at the peak of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, he married actress Sherry Zampino. Their whirlwind romance promised him what he had always longed for, a home unbroken, a family shielded from the chaos he knew as a boy. Soon after, his first son, Trey, was born. In that moment, Will believed he had redeemed his childhood. Holding Trey's tiny hand, he vowed that history's cycles of broken homes and wounded hearts would end with him. But promises are fragile when fame storms the door. Hollywood, relentless and demanding, eroded the young marriage. By 1995, only 3 years later, it ended in divorce. For Will, it was not just heartbreak, it was devastation. Divorce was the ultimate failure, he admitted. He had sworn never to repeat his parents' story, yet here it was, replaying through his own hands. The wound cut deepest with Trey. Distance grew. Trust fractured. The applause of millions could not silence the ache of his son slipping away. That scar became a quiet torment, a reminder that success means nothing if you fail at home. In 1997, Will married Jada Pinkett. Together they built a new family, blessed with Jaden and Willow. To the world, they were Hollywood royalty. To Will, it felt like destiny, another chance to build the home he had once lost. Yet even this love was not spared from storms. Rumors, separations, the infamous entanglement, all played out beneath the blinding scrutiny of the world. Love became both sanctuary and battlefield, strength and scar. For Will, family has always been both salvation and trial. It gave him his greatest joy and his deepest wounds. And in those wounds lies the truth he carried into every stage of life: fame can dazzle the world, but only family can break your soul. Fame may shield you from obscurity, but it cannot shield you from death, disease, or the ghosts within. For Will Smith, the battles that mattered most were not fought in front of cameras, but in the quiet corridors of hospitals and the silence of his own mind. In 2016, his father, Willard Smith Sr., the man who had scarred him with violence and shaped him with discipline, was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Months to live. For Will, it was as if his childhood came rushing back in a flood of unfinished memories. Here was the man who had been both foundation and wound, strength and terror. Sitting by his father's bedside, Will faced the impossible. How do you forgive the very hand that broke your heart? Those final months stripped everything bare. The anger, the guilt, the resentment, all collided with love, duty, and grief. Forgiveness did not erase the past, but it freed him from carrying its weight into the future. When his father passed, Will discovered a paradoxical gift: release. Sometimes the greatest victory is not applause, but peace. But life had more lessons waiting. In 2019, during what should have been a routine check, doctors discovered a precancerous polyp during a colonoscopy. It was removed quickly, but the shadow it cast was enormous. His father had died of cancer. Would he follow the same path? For a man who had spent decades building an image of strength and invincibility, the truth was crushing: even legends are flesh, and flesh is fragile. Then came best shape of my life in 2021. What began as a fitness journey became a confession of despair. Cameras captured not just sweat and push-ups, but a man cracking under pressure, admitting dark thoughts, questioning his worth. Vulnerability became his rebellion. He showed the world that greatness is not in hiding scars, but in carrying them with grace. For Will Smith, healing has never been a straight path. It is a war between body and spirit, shadow and light. And in that war, he discovered that survival is not perfection, it is persistence. At 56 years old, Will Smith no longer lives beneath the roar of constant headlines. He lives in a sanctuary, his sprawling estate in Calabasas, a fortress of silence, creation, and reflection. To the world, it looks like a palace. To Will, it is proof that peace must be built stone by stone, scar by scar. Financially, his empire is unmatched, hundreds of millions in films, music, and ventures through Westbrook Incorporated. Yet, the man who once lost everything to the IRS knows that numbers mean nothing if the soul is bankrupt. Wealth without balance is emptiness. Fame without peace is a prison. So now, his true fortune is measured not in money, but in discipline, in health, in family bonds reforged through fire. Hollywood tested him again after the Oscars scandal. Emancipation was released into silence, overshadowed by his fall. But Will did not vanish. 2 years later, Bad Boys 4 stormed theaters, crossing $400 million worldwide. Audiences were reminded, charisma cannot be cancelled. A king may stumble, but if he rises, the world cannot look away. In 2025, after 2 decades, he returned to music. His album carried a track titled Beautiful Scars. It was not a song, it was a confession, a declaration that wounds are not weaknesses. They are proof of survival. His children, Jaden, Willow, and Trey, carry his legacy in their own voices, their own art. The father once haunted by failure now finds redemption in their strength. His empire is vast, but his truest crown is love restored. Will Smith's story is not about perfection. It is about persistence. Not about crowns without cracks, but about scars that shine brighter than gold. He is no longer the Fresh Prince. No longer just a king of box offices. He is something rarer, a man who has fallen, risen, and chosen to live unbreakable. Greatness is not the absence of scars. It is the courage to carry them, and let them teach the world how to endure.